to further this discussion, let's now welcome Mr. Xhanti Payi. He's a senior economist at PwC, alongside at Agri SA CEO, Mr. Johann Kotze. We are expecting to be joined by him as, of course, we look into the impact of the upcoming 30% US tariffs on South African export products. So, Xhanti, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for your time. Look, as an economist, let's start with you in really engaging, in fact, the potential impact of these tariffs now that we know they are coming into full effect at midnight.
I'm now independent, but I think it's important maybe to start here. It's difficult to say what the impact will be. We know that it is easy to say it will be negative because obviously there is nobody who wants their to pay higher prices, or at least to increase the price of their goods, because anytime you increase the price of your goods, which is exactly what will happen to the price of South African goods because of these tariffs, you tend to find that consumers buy less of that good, or they look for alternatives. Now, here where the problem is that it then becomes difficult to tell how much of that, what economists call the price sensitivity of the particular good, how sensitive it is to changes in prices. So, for example, will a 10% increase, will a 30% increase lead to a big jump or change in whether people are going to buy it, or will it still be affordable to your consumers, or will it induce your consumers to change? That's the difficulty, but we know that there will be a negative impact in terms of, consumers maybe looking for alternatives in terms of these goods, South African goods, for example, maybe looking for markets where the tariff is a little bit less, or those markets find it cheaper to produce what we are producing and selling to the US.
You spoke of alternatives there, Xhanti. Are there currently any alternatives for the affected companies to keep their businesses operational at this late stage? I mean, I had mentioned when the South African delegation had actually visited the White House to reset relations and address the specific concerns around the tariffs, and that upon their return, we're just told that the trip was successful from the South African side. We had never heard anything concrete from the United States, yet still seemingly there was no additional steps then to implement interim mitigatory measures. And now we have to scramble last minute. Let's talk about these alternatives and how feasible they are.
Sure. No, so the alternatives I was talking about, alternatives to our goods. So, for example, what Johann and his comrades are actually putting out in the market are the alternatives that are much cheaper that the consumers would look into. So that's what I'm talking about, US consumers. I'm not talking about alternatives that we can sell. That's a different debate, because obviously, as many people have tried to say, we might want to look for alternative markets. What's difficult, of course, is that you can't just look for alternative market, because remember, any business person is always looking for more markets, always looking to sell more at any given time. So you would have, if it was that easy to find alternative markets, to find other markets, those business people, those producers, agricultural producers, those steel producers, those motor manufacturers would have already been in those markets, because it would have been more sales for them. So it's not as easy as many people have sort of made it to sound, as if, you can sort of look for alternative markets, because if there were alternative and easy markets of access, those people, the producers themselves, would have already found them, and they would have been selling more into those markets. And I think sometimes we have sort of made it as if it's something easy to do, to look for alternative markets for these goods.
All right, let's now welcome Johann, Mr. Johann Kotze there. He's Agri SA CEO. Johann, it's great to have you with us on this discussion as well. Maybe just if you've been lucky enough to catch some parts of our initial conversation there, maybe just also for the agri sector, talk to us about what are some of your most immediate concerns as, of course, the countdown begins now. Are you hopeful that the ongoing talks between the two presidents will actually yield some positive results in due time? And also maybe talk to us about some of those alternatives that you have put forward as Agri SA.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is agriculture as a whole is not going to die. So we're not going to, it's 4% of our total exports to America. but it's a very essential market for us, a very lucrative market, so we can't stop with negotiations.
Johann, I'm sure you heard the minister. Just to ride on the back of what he's saying, you can also just put that aside inside of your answer there that I'd asked you previously in the question there. He's talking about this being an unpredictable market and the need for South Africa to de-risk and to look elsewhere. He mentioned the various alternatives there, and we were just talking about some of the alternatives that you had put forward as Agri SA as well.
I think the first thing is he said that it is still essential for us to have a negotiation with America because it is a lucrative market for us. So we need to have market access. The uncertainty in my mind is the new way of trade negotiations. I think we're going to enter into this space, and this is the way it's going to be. So we need to restructure ourselves, reset ourselves according to the strategy that we have as agriculture or as South Africa in trade, of which diversified markets is a big one. You asked me about the impact. I said to you the impact on agriculture is maybe just 4%, but on certain industries, it's immense. If you take the citrus industry, and they're cyclical, so they can't stop. They're busy harvesting now. They put their stuff on the ships and they're going out to America. They're going to take a hammering. But we also need to talk about that hammering. If you put 30% into a market, somebody needs to pay for it. So either you're not going to be competitive cost-wise in America, or it might be that it is to a certain extent worked into the price of what is selling in America. According to Goldman Sachs, an analyst in America, they had a look at all the tariffs in America, and they came up with a point to say 80% of the cost is normally absorbed by the country itself, who are raising the tariffs. So that's the one point. I think for me, the immediate effect in South Africa for us as agriculture is immense on certain industries, but we still have some time. And as what was said about the EU, we need to go back to the existing markets we have and make sure we're in good standing with us. And I think we talk about new markets, lucrative markets and alternative markets. We need to go back to the existing markets and then also have trade negotiations with them. China, we still pay 25% tariff going into China, India. So I can name it to you. And if you have a look at Australia, they have a free trade agreement with them. So we need to have a bit of a reset on how we do business in South Africa. A tough call for us, but you know what? It's not uncertain anymore. It's 30%. And now we need to deal with the 30%. It's tough to deal with it because it is so in our face, and then we seasonal, we perishable produce. We can't just pull back. But I don't think we're hopeless. I think we have a plan, and I think there's some good coming out of the tough times that we are in that's going to make us a more resilient country to export the produce that we have.
Mm-hmm. And we're talking about some of the alternatives that you have put forward also, Johann. Maybe if you can just quickly take us through those.
So China is a big market to us. India is a big market to us. Africa is a big market to us. But at this stage, we still have tariffs. Then you have the Asian tigers. You have the European market. And don't let go of the American market. We're still in the run for the American market. We need to have the access to market. So I think the Asian tigers is a big one. Africa is a big market. It's a difficult market to be in because of the logistics, and then of course of they are not per capita that strong on buying power, but a lucrative market. So I think before we go into alternatives is first service the markets that we have and make sure we have good trade agreements with them. And then you go and you look for different markets. Remember, the whole world is shaken by this. 185 countries dealing with America. So there's a shift and there's a movement in the export market all over the world. So new opportunities we never had in the past is going to arise, and we're going to go into it. The first is going to the markets that we used to, and make sure you find some new deals, new ideas, new concepts, new free trade agreements, sectorial agreements. Just go and renegotiate on what's happening. Maybe just one comment from agriculture. There's one concern we have. We may not let go of the SPS, the phytosanitary measures we have as agriculture, because that's going to put our agriculture at risk. And that means we need to make sure that the measurements are still in place so that we don't import stuff now South Africa that might cause certain industries to have a disease and fight a greater risk than what we have today. So that is for us, and I think we did speak it out. We did talk to Minister Parkstyle regarding this to make sure that he still protects us, and it's not a barrier to entry for trade. It is literally a risk mitigator to protect the industry itself, which is agriculture.
I'm glad that you mentioned that word there, Johann, because it's come up quite a lot. And I want Xhanti to maybe just also come in there. Xhanti, you also heard the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation there talking about the need to de-risk and multinationalization. So, and you've also heard Johann's, of course, response to that. So let's talk about that. I mean, we've long heard, of course, our president consistently describing our economy as being in a state of emergency, right? And pointing to the country's extraordinary challenges, with the country having to revisit some of those abandoned discussions, as Johann has rightly pointed out, instead of looking for the new ones or previous plans that might have been unviable at the time. Xhanti, what then are the current options for the SA economy to grow? And also talk to us about some of those risks and as well as trade-offs.
I wanted maybe to start at where the minister was going, and he says that, the US is a strategic market. I think it's important now to use that word quite seriously and actually in its real terms. What do we mean when we say something is strategic? What is, in fact, our strategy? Because we need now a serious strategy. Johann was quite correct to say that this is going to be a volatile market for some time to come. Is that now still going to be a main part of the strategy, or are we going to go exactly as what Johann is saying, look at different kinds of markets and say at a certain market we are paying a 25, we are being charged a particular tariff. If we had strategic negotiations there, could we actually do better? So what we need now is to relook and restructure the way in which we look at the world, what we do with our partners, which are our partners, how are they affected even by these tariffs, and how do they look in terms of, and how do they emerge out of this whole eventuality, and how then do we use this moment to actually then think of a new strategy, of a different strategy in terms of how we approach different markets, how we engage them, and that actually now we're also not just going to be talking about just competition and the easy way we've thought about goods markets, but actually that we're going to be quite, I guess, political in some of those conversations, because I guess one of the key things that is emerging now is really how central politics has become in terms of our trade, whereas before actually we're looking at pricing, we're looking at markets, we're looking at our own cost structures and all of that. Now we are thinking about a little bit more in terms of how we think we're going to be using the politics of trade. And so what we need to do now is to think strategically. So the strategy is going to actually be quite widespread into the different markets. I hear Johann speaking very much about the different the emerging economies that are out there. Which ones can we approach? How can we actually also engage there? So we need a strategy. So not to just say a market is strategic. We need to actually think about where does it fall within our strategy in terms of growth, in terms of actually exports. And that's a very, very important thing to do. Again, it's important that we also have a backup plan, because we, we know that an important part of these kinds of markets is the public sector support, and how we're going to support some of the failure that we're going to be seen. Because we know that many of these goods have to be taken to market. When they arrive at market, will they find the kind of space that they found before? And if they don't, what does that mean for the producers? Will those producers be, not compensated per se, but be supported in some way or another so that they can come back in the next season? Because again, if they are hurt too badly now, then those producers, regardless of what they produce, will they be able to be resilient? That's another story. So at this point, with the volatility that we're facing, it's important really that we lean into this word strategy and actually plan to develop a strategy about what is happening at the moment, but what is the long-term game that we're going to be playing, because it looks like we're going to be here for several years, not in certain ways where basically we're going to come back over and over into this space. So we need both a short-term game of play and a longer-term game of play.
Absolutely. And I was just about to say to Johann, because I mean, restructuring obviously doesn't take place or happen overnight. I was just speaking to Wandile Sihlobo the other time, and he was saying some of these agreements and plans may even take up to 5 years. So I was just about to ask Johann, what do you think in terms of the short as well as long-term plans that should be, of course, implemented at this stage? But unfortunately, gentlemen, we are out of time for this interview. But thank you so much for that enlightening discussion there to both of you. That is Mr. Xhanti Payi. Of course, he's an economist there, as well as Agri SA CEO, Mr. Johann Kotze, as we keep on looking into the impact of the 30% US tariffs on South African products as they come into effect at midnight.